In 1995, a young woman's journey across the world brought her to a quiet corner of Tasmania, Australia. It was a trip meant to satisfy her growing curiosity about life and the world around her, but it would become part of a story that's haunted many ever since. Her name was Victoria Ann Elizabeth Cafaso. Born on June 8, 1975, in Surrey, England, Victoria spent most of her childhood and teenage years in Italy. She held both British and Italian citizenship, but her roots and memories were largely Italian. Those who knew her remembered her as someone who stood out, bright, thoughtful, and always ready for something new. Victoria had a strong academic side, something she likely got from her father, who was a respected lawyer. He hoped that one day she might follow the same path. Her mother, however, had a different kind of influence on her. She ran a travel agency, and from there, Victoria seemed to develop a real excitement for exploring. She often accompanied her mother on trips, growing more and more connected to the idea of seeing the world. Her upbringing was a comfortable one, and by all accounts, she embraced life with joy and curiosity. She had close ties with her family, and they spoke of her with real affection. She wasn't just friendly and full of life. Victoria was also impressively gifted. She spoke 3 languages fluently: Italian, English, and French. She excelled academically, and when she told her father she wanted to study law, he was incredibly proud. Keeping to her word, she enrolled at a university in Italy and began her studies in law, preparing herself for what could have been a very successful career. But during her time at university, something kept tugging at her. The urge to explore only got stronger. Around this time, she was about 20 years old. She sat down with her family and let them know she wanted to take a break and spend some time in England with her grandparents. Her father, though proud of her achievements, was a little disappointed with her decision, but he respected her independence. So Victoria packed her things and went to England. It was there that her next plans started to take shape. A trip even farther away to Australia. She had a cousin living in Tasmania, Simon Howard de Salis. Tasmania is an island state off the southern coast of mainland Australia, about 240 kilometers away. While staying with her grandparents, Victoria reached out to Simon by phone. She told him she was thinking about visiting and asked if she could stay with him for a while. Though the 2 cousins had only met twice before and didn't know each other too well, Simon welcomed the idea and said she was more than welcome to stay with him. With that, Victoria set her plan in motion. She booked her flight, packed her bags again, and prepared for another long journey. On October 6, 1995, she arrived in Australia. Waiting for her at the airport was Simon, along with one of his friends. From there, they set off for Beaumaris, a small coastal town where Simon lived. At the time, Beaumaris was a quiet little place with only a few hundred residents. It was home mostly to people who had retired, along with a mix of local surfers and fishermen. Simon was renting a small cottage in the area, and this would be Victoria's base for the trip. On their way to the house, the group made a stop at a scenic spot called Shirley's Lookout, which gave a wide view over Beaumaris Beach. While there, Victoria was introduced to a few locals. One of them was a woman named Hilda Jackson. Hilda later said that she and Victoria became friends almost right away. She remembered feeling an instant warmth toward her. In her words, Victoria was very, very pleasant, very gentle, softly spoken, intelligent, and very attractive. She spoke highly of her character and remembered her as someone who left a lasting impression even in a short time. People often commented on how much Victoria and Hilda looked alike. It was one of those coincidences that caught attention right away, a detail that in time would come to feel oddly important. Aside from Hilda, though, Victoria didn't really have the chance to meet many others in the area. Her time in Tasmania was brief, just a few days. And heartbreakingly, before she could really settle in, Victoria would become the victim of one of the most shocking and puzzling murder cases the region had ever seen. She had arrived on October 6th. Within the span of a week, she was gone. On October 9th, Victoria paid a visit to her new friend Hilda Jackson's home. She stayed for about 30 minutes, and during their chat, the 2 women talked about spending more time together, maybe planning a full day out. After that visit, Victoria attended a small birthday celebration for a woman named Mandy, who actually owned the cottage where her cousin Simon was staying. Later that evening, Victoria took a slow walk around the area before returning to the cottage. The following day was quiet, just another walk, likely an effort to become more familiar with her new surroundings. Then came October 11th. That morning, Victoria woke up early. At around 8:10 a.m., she let Simon know she was heading to the beach and borrowed a small carry bag from him. The two sat down to have breakfast and share a short conversation. By 9 a.m., she stepped out and made her way toward the shore. About an hour later, around 10 a.m., witnesses saw Victoria sunbathing roughly 700 meters south of the beach entrance near the Surfside Hotel. One of those who spotted her was Hilda Jackson. She saw Victoria walking alone in the direction of the beach and thought about heading there later for a run. Hilda had hoped to run into her again and maybe chat a little. That moment turned out to be the last time anyone saw Victoria alive. Later, Hilda did go for her run, but she chose to jog in the opposite direction from where Victoria had been sunbathing. She said she made that decision simply because running into the wind made the return trip easier. It's a small choice that Hilda has never stopped thinking about. She later said she's haunted by the thought that had she gone the other way, she might have unknowingly prevented something terrible. That same day, at around 1:30 p.m., a local woman named Margaret was walking her dog near Freshwater Creek, as she did almost every day. Margaret knew this stretch of beach well. It was her usual walking route, a quiet place where she could enjoy the sea breeze with her dog. But on that day, something looked out of place. Off in the distance, she noticed something lying along the shoreline. As she got closer, it became clear that what she was seeing wasn't just debris. It was the body of a young woman. The body was face down in the sand, with waves gently rolling over it. Clothing was missing, and the figure appeared lifeless. Margaret froze. Shock and disbelief washed over her. She stood for a few seconds, trying to take in what she was seeing. Then she turned and ran. She needed help, fast. The nearest home belonged to two men she knew, and she rushed there, banging on the door. When the men answered, she explained what she'd found. At first, they weren't sure what to think. It was a quiet town, the kind of place where these things didn't happen, but they agreed to go back with her and see for themselves. Together, they returned to the beach. Once there, it was confirmed. This was a young woman's body, and something was very wrong. That was when the police were called. Police, forensic teams, and detectives responded, beginning what would become a deeply troubling investigation. The victim was soon identified as Victoria Cafaso. Her cousin Simon, along with the rest of her family, was notified. It was immediately clear that this was no accident. Victoria had been murdered. The crime scene investigation began right away, and her belongings were scattered nearby. Among the items found were a bangle, a pair of sunglasses, a shoulder bag, sand shoes, a ring, and a watch. These were all found spread out in the sand near her. Victoria's body was discovered partially unclothed, lying where the water met the shore. She had been stabbed 17 times. 2 of the stab wounds had pierced her heart, causing fatal internal injuries. Her face and head had also been stabbed, which painted a picture of rage and brutality. There were deep cuts on her hands and arms, defensive wounds, showing she had fought back with everything she had. She didn't go down easily. Investigators also noted that 3 of her teeth were broken, suggesting she had been struck in the face with serious force. Part of her face appeared caved in. This attack wasn't quick or random, it was prolonged and extremely violent. Around 55 meters away from where her body was found, there were signs that a struggle had taken place. What made the scene even more troubling was what couldn't be found. Her bikini bottoms, her towel, and the t-shirt she had been wearing were all missing. None of those items were ever recovered. From the moment the investigation started, police made several serious errors. There were multiple footprints visible in the sand where Victoria was attacked, one of which could have belonged to the person who killed her. But investigators only took a cast of one single footprint, and even that one sample wasn't preserved properly. The quality was poor, lacking the detail needed to compare it confidently to any known footwear. Forensic experts would later say the print was basically useless, and with it, a potential lead slipped away. A clear and well-preserved footprint might have helped investigators learn a lot about who was responsible. It could have shown the person's shoe size, how they walked, and even the kind of shoes they had on. All of this would have been useful in comparing against suspects later on, or figuring out if any of the people known to be in the area matched. Sadly, the only cast the police made of one footprint turned out to be worthless. And beyond that, they didn't take casts of the other footprints around the scene. What's even more troubling is that before a full and proper crime scene examination was completed, police moved Victoria's body and covered her with a blue tarp to keep the public from seeing her. But in doing this, they brought outside materials into the scene, contaminating the evidence and making the job of solving the case that much harder. The area around Victoria's body wasn't properly closed off in time either, which led to people walking through it by accident. This created even more problems for investigators. But the missteps didn't stop there. Important photos and video recordings weren't taken, and the state's forensic pathologist didn't come to the scene, which delayed both the collection and review of critical forensic clues. The handling of the scene was so badly done that it worked in the attacker's favor. Mistakes like these meant that key opportunities to catch the person responsible were lost right from the start. So now, the big question remains, who could have done this, and why? The idea that someone was able to commit such a brutal act in broad daylight stunned the quiet beachside community. It gave rise to many different ideas and suspicions. One theory suggested that the crime had ties to the Italian mafia. Some wondered if Victoria had been targeted because her father, a lawyer in Italy, had prosecuted mafia members. But police found no actual proof for this idea. Others feared there might be a repeat offender in the area. That belief came from a previous case involving another tourist, Nancy Grunwald, who disappeared 2 years earlier without a trace. Nancy was a 26-year-old woman from Germany who had been cycling along Tasmania's east coast when she vanished on March 12, 1993. Her case remains unsolved. Nancy had arrived in Tasmania from New Zealand on March 6, 1993, planning to explore the island by bike. She rented one on March 9th and began her journey, riding through towns like St. Helens and staying in various hostels along the way. On the morning of March 12th, she left the hostel in St. Helens heading south along the Tasman Highway. The last confirmed sighting of her was around 11 a.m. that day. After that, she was simply gone. Her disappearance was deeply unsettling, and some started to believe it might be connected to what happened to Victoria. After Victoria's body was found, police questioned Simon, Hilda, and several others she had met during her short time in Tasmania. Each of them had strong alibis and was cleared, but with no one clearly responsible, tension in the community rose. People became suspicious of one another, afraid they might be blamed or that the real killer could be someone they knew. Victoria's family made the difficult journey from Italy to Tasmania. They stood on the beach where their daughter had lost her life, grieving and seeking answers. After her autopsy was complete, Victoria's body was flown back to Italy for her funeral. Once her parents returned home, they were met with a heartbreaking surprise: a letter from Victoria. It had arrived in the mail just days before she was murdered. In it, she wrote that she was having a great time in Australia, completely unaware of what was coming. During the investigation, over 300 people were looked at as potential suspects. But despite the time and the location of the attack, no one saw or heard anything unusual. And this was in daylight, on a beach that was visited regularly. Just weeks later, Australia faced another tragedy, the Port Arthur massacre carried out by Martin Bryant. At one point, police considered whether Bryant could have been responsible for Victoria's death too, but after looking into it, he was ruled out. The focus then shifted to 4 men who came to be known as key persons of interest in the case. Investigators and the media gave them nicknames: the surfer, the fisherman, the biker, and the doctor. These 4 were looked at closely. Based on the timeline, it's believed that Victoria was killed at around 11:30 a.m. So let's begin with the man they called the surfer. This man has never been identified. He became important to the investigation after a number of witnesses reported seeing someone matching his description at the beach that morning. The witnesses described a young man in his mid-20s, fit and around 6 feet tall, with the kind of look you'd associate with someone who surfed. He was seen running on the beach at around 11 a.m. on the day Victoria was killed. Around the same time, a light-coloured Subaru station wagon was parked nearby. Investigators believe this man may have been the driver. What makes this even more suspicious is that the vehicle left the area not long after the murder happened. To this day, this man has never come forward and the car has never been found. The second key person of interest was the fisherman. His real name was Tony Kirkland, and early in the investigation, he raised concerns due to reports of unusual behavior in the area. Weeks before Victoria was killed, Hilda had an unsettling experience with a man near the beach dunes. He approached her slowly and asked how to get off the beach, but the way he did it was so strange and off-putting that Hilda felt uneasy. After her run that day, she noticed something else disturbing. Her underwear, which she had hidden in the dunes during her jog, had been taken. When she returned home, she learned that her neighbor's clothesline had been raided too, with only the women's clothing missing. This pointed to the idea that someone had been watching women and stealing from them. Police later identified that man as Tony Kirkland. He lived in a nearby town and was already known to the police for other reasons. Investigators wondered if Kirkland had been planning to target Hilda all along, but mistook Victoria for her instead. After all, the two women looked a lot alike, and multiple people had pointed out their striking resemblance. A few years later, in 1998, Tony Kirkland was served with a restraining order after a 17-year-old girl accused him of stalking her and threatening her. During the investigation into Victoria's murder, Kirkland continued to show up in strange ways, offering himself into conversations about the case, which raised even more red flags. A magistrate would later comment that the fisherman, quote, relished being a suspect. It seemed like the attention made him feel important, and he got some kind of thrill from being in the spotlight. Even with that strange behavior, he denied having anything to do with Victoria's death. As things stand today, the police don't believe he was responsible. Moving on to another suspect, and the man known as the biker. His name was Gary Holmes. He wasn't part of any biker gang, but he owned a motorcycle, which is how the nickname came about. He was a local and started acting oddly after the murder, which brought him to the attention of the police. Witnesses said that on the day Victoria's body was discovered, Gary looked off. When people mentioned the killing, he looked spaced out, almost like he wasn't really there. Some thought it might have been from shock, while others wondered if it was guilt. Gary also gave different versions of what he was doing that morning, and the inconsistencies made investigators even more suspicious. But what really raised eyebrows were the injuries he had that same day. Cuts, bruises, and even blood on his face and arm. When asked about it, Gary said he got hurt after punching a door during a heated fight with his ex-wife. Police weren't fully convinced by this explanation, but despite the suspicions and his strange behavior, the investigation eventually moved past him. Then there was the doctor. Dr. Roman Hassel, originally from the Czech Republic, was working in the area as a gynecologist at the time of the murder. His name became one of the most talked about in the entire case. He strongly denied having any part in what happened to Victoria. Back in October 1995, Dr. Hassel was practicing medicine in St. Helens, not far from where Victoria was killed. What many didn't know right away was that he had only recently come to Tasmania just weeks earlier, after getting out of prison for threatening his second wife with a knife. He had a history of being fascinated with bladed weapons, which added to the suspicions. Right away, investigators learned that he had no solid alibi for the morning of October 11th. The doctor claimed he was at home, unwell, but no one could confirm that he was actually there. Making things worse, he had scratch marks on his face. At first, he told police that he'd never even been to the beach where Victoria was killed, but that statement didn't hold up for long. Later, one of his former girlfriends came forward and said that the doctor had admitted to her that he was at that beach on the day of the murder. This completely contradicted what he had told the police. And years later, in 2008, one of his ex-wives said she asked him directly if he was the one who killed Victoria. His answer? Maybe I did, I don't recall. The truth is, the doctor has never officially been cleared. His medical license was later revoked due to other serious issues in his career, and he's no longer allowed to practice. The police have said they'd still like to hear from anyone with information related to him. Some investigators have even said they wouldn't be surprised if he turned out to be the person behind it all. But as of now, there's no hard proof to charge him. And with that, the case gradually went cold. In a heartbreaking turn, Victoria's father died just weeks after she did, and he was buried right beside his daughter. The police do occasionally reopen the file and look through the evidence again using more modern technology, hoping to spot something they might have missed the first time. But so far, no one has been arrested. Investigators have said there are still people on their radar, and that includes the 4 men already mentioned. No one has been completely cleared, and they won't be until the case is finally solved. The impact of this tragedy reached far beyond Victoria's family. It changed the town, and it changed the people in it. Hilda Jackson later said that before the murder, people would leave their doors unlocked. Neighbors trusted one another, but after what happened, things changed. Suspicion crept in, and people started to question everyone, even those they'd known for years. Some moved away. Some marriages didn't survive. The fear and the grief never really left, especially since whoever did this might still be living among them. One highly respected coroner reviewed the entire case and came to a painful conclusion. Even if the police found the killer today, there likely wouldn't be a conviction. So much evidence was lost in the first days of the investigation that it would now be incredibly hard to make a case without reasonable doubt. The coroner added that unless the killer confessed, which is highly unlikely, the truth might never fully come out. Victoria's case remains one of those that deeply hurts to think about. Her family was shattered by what happened, and with no answers, their grief has never truly found peace. For many in the town, the most chilling detail of all is that some of Victoria's teeth, which were knocked out during the attack, were never found. That suggests someone may have taken them. If so, that means someone out there might still be holding onto them, keeping them as a twisted reminder of the day they ended a young woman's life and left a small community forever changed. We'd really like to hear your thoughts on this case. Do you think justice will ever be served for Victoria, or do you believe the truth may never come to light? Let us know your opinion in the comments. We read every single one. And if you found this video thoughtful or informative, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. A like and a share also go a long way in helping us keep stories like this alive and in the public eye. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.